Yes.
Alderman Sage.
Yes.
Alderman Malamoy.
Yes.
Alderman Burgess.
Yes.
Alderman Painter.
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt.
Yes.
Alderman Black.
Yes.
Alderman Hallman.
Yes.
Okay, and we're back. And at this point, we have a proposal for the Bloomington Center for the Performing Arts. We have a presentation by David Hales, City Manager, and Stephen Peters, President of Venue Works, for 15 minutes. And then we have up to a 30-minute council discussion. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Hales and Mr. Peters.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. I just, as Steve Peters and Lynn Cannon come forward, let me just make a few comments tonight. I'm asking you to consider in this work session to, one, hear from Steve Peters, President of Venue Works, who has submitted, at my request, an official proposal for management of the Bloomington Center for Performing Arts. Just a couple of quick reasons why I feel that consideration should be given to this proposal, and among many of the reasons, we have seen an increasing subsidy that has had to be sent to, or at least help to offset the financial situation of the BCPA. This increasing subsidy is above and beyond the $1.7 million that about 5 years ago the council wanted to see a gap. Another thing is it has become apparent to me that one of the great strengths that someone like a Venue Works can bring is their deep, comprehensive knowledge of the industry, of both performing arts, amusement, and what they can bring to the table that sometimes you just don't get when you bring people that don't have that experience, haven't worked at other venues, or don't have the kind of organization they have. Secondly, we have a lot of vacancies over there right now at the BCPM, and including the BCPA manager position, which lends itself to being an opportune time to consider this. Ultimately, what we're considering, you recommend is that if you were so inclined to feel that this would be good for the city to entertain having Venue Works, not only to add the BCPA to their overall master agreement, this would dovetail or coincide with their current 5-year agreement, which they're 2 years into it. And I think there's a lot of benefits that could come from that. So with that in mind, I wanted to keep this short and really turn the bulk of the time to Mr. Peters to speak about what they can bring in the way of additional assets, experience, industry expertise to help us as we continue to make the BCPA a shining example of a venue to provide arts, culture, and theater here in the city of Bloomington. So we welcome Steve Peters. He's joined by Lynn Cannon, Executive Director at the Arena. Mr. Peters.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Am I close enough to the mic? Is that all right? Okay. I know that you have a copy of the proposal and the attachment to that, and I think you all also have a copy of the PowerPoint. So I'll walk very quickly through the PowerPoint, and we'll jump into question and answer. It's probably best for discussion purposes anyway. So, let's see, is this, not sure where we're gonna, how do we advance? Oh, we've left on the, okay, there we go, all right. This is some of the theaters that we manage. Several of them are also historic theaters. Specifically, nearby, there's Evansville to the south, the Victory Theater, Adler Theater in Davenport, the Paramount in Cedar Rapids, all historic theaters, beautiful theaters like the BCPA. So we presented, along with the letter of proposal, quite a booklet of kinds of things that we do. Not all of this would necessarily apply to everything that would need to be done at the BCPA, but it gives you an idea of how we approach managing venues. And these 5 boxes really illustrate that area, both in operations, financial administration and HR, programming, catering and concessions, and then marketing and sales. Those are sort of self-explanatory. We've got some notes on that. And you see that sort of section borne out in the materials that that we presented. And this, a little bit more about where we run arenas with theaters, but in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, we actually have 4 venues in Cedar Rapids, not only an arena and a historic theater, the 1,900-seat Paramount, or 1,700 seats after it was renovated, actually, after the flood, that when the capacity was reduced a bit to give more comfort to patrons. But we also run an amphitheater and an ice arena, a separate ice arena from the multi-purpose arena, which would be a good corollary because there we have 4 different contracts. They're all owned by city venues. They're all owned by the city, but we manage each of those. We keep separate P&Ls. We track expenses and revenues specific to each of those venues. In Evansville, we have an arena with an historic theater attached, or right across the street, rather, but it's attached to the contract. The same thing. In Kennewick, where we have an arena and a conference center, we also have a theater program that happens inside the arena where we create a separate theater. Not so much a direct corollary to what we're talking about here, not an historic theater. A little bit about our programming. John Jimenez is our Vice President for Programming and Content. Spent 20 years in Nashville with William Morris Endeavor. After that, he worked in Houston with the Becker organization. He's been with us for about 2.5 years. We do a lot of buying. We work with a lot of promoters. We do a lot of networking, so we're bringing activity to the venues that we serve. We have a national contract with Ticketmaster, which puts us in touch with Live Nation. Those are one and the same company. So that we get a good deal of programming from Live Nation. That's one of the largest, it is, I guess, the largest promoter in the country. You'll hear me talk about promoters because we think there is an opportunity to bring more promoters and more promoted activity to the BCPA. The program that's there is beautiful. This is, as you probably know, but this is the season. And this is announced early summer, late spring. Tickets go on sale. There is follow-up promotion through emails and newsletters throughout the season that promotes these events. But the BCPA is at risk on virtually all of these events. The same is true with the Student Spotlight Series. Fantastic events, beautiful events that are happening, but the BCPA is at risk. And what I think we could offer is not to encroach at all on these programs. We offer similar programs in our theaters. We'd have a very similar program to this where I live in Ames, Iowa, at Stevens Auditorium and Fisher Theater on the campus of Iowa State University, where we offer the same kind of programming. And by and large, these programs do not make money, nor do we expect them to. But we know what the budget is, and we know where the risk is, and we know exactly where our break-even is going to be as we program that. And we would bring that kind of assessment to the programming of these same sorts of events. Not to reduce the events, but in some cases, if we're buying the same event, you've got Kinky Boots in here. Kinky Boots is playing several of our theaters. If we know what we're paying in 3 other theaters and we can help the BCPA from overpaying, and I'd have no idea what was paid for that event, but at least we have a basis of comparison on which to benchmark the kinds of charges you're seeing for your production costs. But on top of that, we have the opportunity to look outward and bring in promoted events that will bring, that you don't have to carry all the risk for. So your risk is mitigated. The promoter rents the hall. There's revenue coming to the venue from that rental, also from food and beverage sales, and from other ancillary revenues. But you have more programming, maybe 6 or 8 events a year, but that could make a big difference. I mean, that could be another $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to the bottom line of the BCPA. So in terms of programming, we think that makes a difference. Midwest routing, Rialto in Joliet, you see Cedar Rapids, Evansville, Topeka, a little further away, Adler and Davenport getting closer, Burnsville in Minnesota, CY Stevens in Ames. So you see we've got a lot of similar venues that range in size from 1,000 seats to about 2,500 in that list. Revenue streams that we can develop. Fundraising, we do have fundraising and fundraisers that are hired in some of our venues. Let me make a distinction between fundraising and event sponsorships. Fundraising is a philanthropic gift. Event sponsorships are typically applying a business name to an event or to a series of events that brings in more revenue than you would have just from ticket sales. We do a lot of that. Premium seating and services, where it's appropriate, and it wouldn't be for every event, but maybe there is premium seating that's possible in a theater in the BCPA, where for extra services, maybe there's backstage, maybe there's a separate reception downstairs or a before and after kind of a place to go if you're a particular member of a seating area. So we might generate more revenues for not only the venue, but maybe for the users of the BCPA, like the symphony, so that they would share in some of that revenue as well. Food and beverage. We've been able to improve food and beverage profitability in the theaters that we've moved into by expanding the food line, by the line of products, the menus that are offered, by just concentrating on that service. Fans, the people that attend events, appreciate that opportunity to have food and beverage. That's especially true. We do a lot of dance contests. Dance contests where parents, maybe some of you have had this experience, where you're in the building all day long while the kids do all these various dance things that they're doing, and everybody likes the opportunity to have a little bit different something to eat other than just popcorn or just a truffle and a glass of wine, and we're offering those in places where it makes sense. And it has a profound impact on the revenues coming into the venue. And then, ticketing and marketing, like I mentioned earlier, we do have a national contract with Ticketmaster. We have a very unique contract with Ticketmaster so that we're able to control service fees. I know that you have a different company now, and that the BCPA, I believe, pays an inside charge that somebody pays. I don't know if the symphony or somebody that's sponsoring the event has to pay for that, but it might be $2, $3, $4 a ticket, and then the customer doesn't pay that. With Ticketmaster, we have the option to turn that around if we want to make that a customer pay. It'd only be paid by somebody using online purchasing or at an outlet or over the phone. I guess outlets really don't apply so much anymore. But it always the opportunity to go to the box office and pay the face value of the ticket. I would also point out that we have great analytics available to us from Ticketmaster so that we know where the tickets were sold, we know how to get in touch with people. Gives us a great advantage in terms of using social media and digital marketing to be able to reach and inform our customers about what's coming up. So we're already at the arena, and we think this is an opportunity to bring the two operations together for the benefit of some efficiency. There are 5 open positions between BCPA and the arena right now that if we were to look at some type of consolidation, we'd be able to, I think, provide service where we need it and still save money overall for the number of positions that are needed within the city. Our contract, by the way, is as it is in the arena. It's a cost plus fee. So we're not, the costs pass through us. They become VenueWorks employees, but they're still paid. They're part of what the city pays to run the venues. So that's not something that we're paying. Like I said, it's a pass-through. Everything is a pass-through. So we're totally transparent. We're totally accountable in the way we manage those funds and the way we receive those revenues. And we're reporting on a monthly basis. We do an annual budget, and then we report how we're doing against that budget on a monthly, annually, on a monthly basis. We have a wrap-up annual report at the end of the year. So we're continually providing those kinds of reports and that kind of information and transparency to the city. So we'd be able to do this. We're offering that for a fee of $3,000 a month. And that comes with, as I mentioned before, those boxes, all those 5 boxes. So we maintain a staff that provides ongoing support in each one of those areas. So marketing, programming, finance and HR, all those things have expertise that we're able to help with. Now, David said that because we have a group of people, we're able to offer more than any one single person could, and that's true. We offer those expertise areas to be able to support your team here. It's sort of like saying that the team that's on the field is supported by all the players that are also on the bench, and that's what we bring. We're that coaching staff, we're that support mechanism. That's it.
I want to hit on the transparency issue, because obviously that's a very important one and
Understand.
salient one today. But certainly we've, at least over the past half decade plus, have been trying to insist as much as possible on as much openness and transparency in the operations of Coliseum or the BCPA or anything as possible. And specifically, you're going to be providing us anything we want to know within what period of time?
Well, almost overnight. I mean, I'm not sure. But I'm not
certainly
sure how to
within
answer
30
that, but-
days.
Yeah, oh, yeah. So, I mean,
Okay.
we have a monthly report.
Okay.
It's due by the 20th of the month for the month that just closed. And you see how we're doing against budget, both expense and revenues. And we're trying to balance to a bottom line and still maximize the number of events. The revenues that come in go to the sponsors of the events. Now, there may be some of these commercial promoters that we try to bring in, a few more of them. But, I mean, we're not there to set the prices. We're not there to set the prices of the usage of the BCPA. In fact, when we took over at the arena, local groups using the ice saw a reduction in the hourly rate for ice time at the arena. So, I mean, that's not for us to determine. We'll bring a budget. That budget will have in it what the rates are, and the city right here will decide if you want to go with that, or if you want us to bring in more revenue, you want to add something to those fees, we'll have that discussion. But it's not up to us to decide that.
Thank you very much. Questions? Anything else, Mr. Hales, that you want to add?
Yes, let me ask Mr. Peters' comment on two other things.
Okay.
One, we do have the Creativity Center. Can you just explain a little bit about why that's not part of this proposal and anything unique about that? And then second, there has been, some questions about bookings going on and how, sometimes this fall has been a little dry on that. Can you comment on that, both from the arena and how you will augment the BCPA's kind of regular season by these other events that, sometimes hasn't been maybe part of the norm, or what we've tried to add to the BCPA lineup?
Right. Okay, so the first part of that was the
Creativity Center.
Creativity Center.
Mhm, yep.
There's nothing we can bring to the Creativity Center. We don't do that kind of programming. When we take on an account, we have to be able to show how we're going to increase revenues and reduce expenses in order to not only pay for ourselves, but improve the bottom line of you, the city of Bloomington. The sorts of programming going on in the Creativity Center are not in our wheelhouse, and so we're just not prepared to do that. That's why we didn't bid on that. In terms of programming, we're in the process of repositioning the arena so that we're not overpaying for events. We want to have that risk assessment. We want to mitigate the risk. I can tell you that I've personally spent tens of thousands of dollars that didn't come back to me in the last year and a half sponsoring events and promoting events at the arena, but we're mitigating your risk. We're bringing our own money, and we've certainly got skin in the game in terms of promoting these events. We have a few weeks, a couple of periods this fall where we held dates for changing over the Dasher and Ice system to a new system. I hope that would happen in November. Now it looks like that's happening in December, so those dates, but that blocked us trying to book maybe quite as much as we wanted to. In any case, we're looking at 6, maybe 7 good, strong events that are in our pipeline that should happen between now and April. And we think we're getting there in terms of turning the corner and bringing those. I mean, right now you see that we've got Gaffigan, we've got Paw Patrol, a very popular event. We've got Cirque Holidays. So, I mean, we're bringing those events, not only just the country events like we had with Hank Jr., but other events. Chris Stapleton in the spring was a sellout. So we're getting there, but this was an arena that was known as paying top dollar for events, and sometimes that's not warranted, and we're repositioning that.
Let me just add, regarding the Creativity Center, our highest priority has been, is there council desire to continue to consider this proposal from Venue Works? If there is, then what I would propose that in 2 weeks, we bring to you what's really going to be an amendment to the master agreement, because we see in the master agreement between Venue Works and the city for the arena, it covers so many of the same issues. So it would be an amendment to add the BCPA on the same terms and conditions, but with a few differences such as the fee and so forth. There is, that's something we could, have continued discussions, say in another week or two, but that's kind of one of the things we were wanting to see some direction tonight. Would you like to continue to proceed? Now, secondly, if the answer is yes, well, we'll also bring back to you as well, what is the plan for the Creativity Center going forward? Keep in mind that currently that building has a lot to be desired. And that's one thing that I'm working with Steve Rasmussen, the Parks Director. This is a building that is in need of major renovation. You all know the price tag. And so what we're going to be looking at is, okay, the current status quo, what can we do with all the ills or the challenges we have in that building, but what would be the future and what resources might be needed? Keep in mind that the mission, the Creativity Center, is not going to be a profit-generating venture, nevertheless. So my recommendation that as we start to look at the future for the Creativity Center, you'll probably want to look at that as any and all other programs of the city, because they're all going to be competing for part of those operating dollars and especially capital dollars to get them up to a state of usability and expansion to fully utilize that building. But that's something we're working on now. We hope to have something to you by the end of the month, so you have a better picture of current status quo versus future, and what can we do, in those two phases of that building and that program.
Okay, but except that we do want to also note that we have about $1 million in private money for the Creativity Center.
We'll come back with a report on that too. Steve and others who have been looking at that will also show you the itemized list of any controls or any conditions, any and all that money, and we'll give you a good full report of that here sometime
Excellent.
soon.
Thank you. Alderman Matthey, I saw first. So I have Matthey, Painter, Black, and then we'll go to the others. So Alderman Matthey.
I've got a laundry list of questions. I would just say, first of all, David, and I've expressed this to you as well, that any kind of conversation about this for me moving forward all depends on the Creativity Center and how that's tied in along with summer theater program. That's all part of it. I'd also say that in terms of the Creativity Center, we have a group of folks in town, of private residents, who have been trying to help. They've already raised $1 million of private money, and we have been the slowdown on that. We've been waiting on approval of a memorandum of understanding for 9 months at this point to move forward with that, which actually leads me into the second question is, Steve, you mentioned fundraising, and David, or anybody can answer me this. I'm trying to figure out how we have fundraising at the BCPA. Is that different than fundraising for the Creativity Center? Is the Friends of the BCPA, how does that, that's a question I need answered, is how does that all play together with the Friends of the BCPA group and fundraising? And that group has gone so far as that they're talking about helping us fund a development person full-time that would be like a half city staff, half private staff person, kind of modeled after the Zoological Society. And if that person's going out and raising money, where does that money go? So I think that's a question that we need to have answered before we can move forward as well. The nonprofit groups, I'm glad you addressed that because we have a bunch of them who use the theater. Symphony
We do it
Orchestra, Barber
in all our
Shoppers.
theaters, yeah.
And I want to make sure that we continue to make the theater available to them where they can continue to deliver that content at a reasonable rate, where they feel like they can still continue to participate. I think that's important for the city. A couple things that were listed in your presentation was selling naming rights. Is that common
that's
for
part of
these
the-
sorts of venues versus arenas?
It could be applied to a theater. We're actually looking at a few of those right now, some of these. One in particular, Historic Theater, where there's a new interest in applying a naming sponsor to it. But that's up to you. We really kind of just threw everything, we put it all in there as this is what's available from us. So if that was something that you were interested in our doing, we could seek that. When we do something like that, well, we did it with Grosinger, but we use a company out of Michigan that does a lot of work for NASCAR, and they determine what the value is of those impressions. So there's a number of impressions that BCPA generates each year, and you figure, okay, if a sponsor had their name on that, what would that sponsor pay to recreate those same number of impressions through a range of media, from social media to traditional print, radio, TV, and so forth. That comes back, and it's always quite a number. This is a group in Ann Arbor. And then we try to get like a 5-to-1 value to price ratio that we can show a sponsor. So if it was $1 million a year, we don't always get 5-to-1 or 1/5 of that, but maybe it's $100,000 a year, $125,000 a year, or up to $200,000 a year that you might ask a sponsor for. And then we develop proposals, and we identify with you good prospects for naming rights, and then we move forward.
Okay. A couple more questions that came out of your presentation. The maintenance section was lengthy, and I love to see the ongoing continuous capital improvements of buildings so we don't have issues. It references several times a CMMS system for keeping up with the maintenance, and I don't think we have one right now.
Well, and you wouldn't be subjected to that. We bring some elements of that anyway, so that would sort of come along with us, I guess. But we're not so tied with that as we are having a strict regiment that we know that we're keeping the maintenance. And I'm talking the things that we would do might be the most mundane sorts of things. There's patching a wall where plaster got pushed out, or repairing a light switch, or just doing a number of things that come up. But, then the capital planning is a whole different thing, where we'd be planning with you probably on a 5-year plan for any kind of capital improvements or just maintenance. What's the roof? What's the life expectancy on the roof, and when do you think that that's going to come up? We prioritize capital planning into 3 things. One is protect the asset you already have. So always go to the roof. If the roof isn't good, nothing under it is safe. So protect what you have. First I'll go back even further. Life safety. First is life safety. Second is protect the asset that you have. And third, what are new revenue or options you can give to your client base that would generate new revenue or new interest in the venue? What are new enhancements that you could create?
Okay. I was actually mostly concerned about having to buy a software package because I know those are expensive. So what becomes of our current volunteer docent program?
Gosh, I hope that we'd be working with them for many years. We have similar sorts of programs everywhere, particularly, it turns out, in historic theaters, but, new theaters as well.
Okay. One of the other things that your proposal talked about is that you have a private group of citizens in each area to get public feedback from regarding programming and stuff of that nature.
Typically, we have some advisory board apparatus of some sort.
Do we already have that in Bloomington for the arena? Maybe that's a program question for Lynn.
No, we don't yet.
Okay. I was just, like I said, I was reading through the proposal.
It's probably more common with the performing arts, but we very often have advisory boards. We're used to working with boards. Whatever a city would set up and want us to work with, we'd be happy to work with them.
Okay.
It gives us input from the community, and it also provides us the opportunity to send information out to the community through the people that sit on that board.
Okay. And David, this might be another question for you, but, have we talked to any of the communities where Venue Works provides a multi-venue contract to find out how that's going between the various venues? I mean, to get their, as an example, maybe, Ames, Iowa, where they've got, or Cedar Rapids, where they have the 4 venues?
Not since we brought Venue Works in a year and a half ago when we initially reached out. Even at that early stage, comments, we knew that they had experience in managing multiple venues, so the outreach we did at that time, we received a lot of very positive feedback. Now, each area is very different, because the local dynamics of booking and things like that is unique, and I think that's what we're finding here, is Bloomington is different, and our competition continues to go up. Let me, if I can, also mention a couple of the other comments you had. Is first off, I do believe that the discussion on the Creativity Center can run parallel to and separate from the BCPA. Because keep in mind, the BCPA is where the bulk of the current funding and the seriousness of the what has been a growing operating deficit has been growing in the BCPA, not the Creativity Center. Second, the money being raised, we did put in the budget, roof repair, HVAC. Some of that, we're waiting on those bids. The HVAC is Farnsworth is having to modify that because so much of that is tied into what's the final design of the BCPA. I do think one thing that is going to be critical for the council in the very near future to talk about what is going to be the public dollar contribution or commitment together with private dollars for the eventual main price tag for renovation of the Creativity Center. And I can't underestimate that because, again, HVAC, it works hand in hand with what's the final plan. And just like with the Zoological Society, we worked out kind of a cost-sharing arrangement. I think that is a yet-to-be-determined policy decision by the council of how much tax dollars are going to be contributed, how much from private dollars, or should it all come from the private sector. So those, and keep in mind, there is a proposed MOU out there from the Friends of the BCPA. Currently, I believe that we need to act on which way we going. Are we going to outsource and contract with Venue Works? And if not, then our current process of having Parks and Rec and BCPA oversee both the BCPA and the Creativity Center is something, that we could continue under that model. But again, the big question is, do we kind of look at separating the management of the two? So those are just a couple of quick comments, some of the other questions.
Okay. And just to let you know, I'm going to let you finish your questions. It's just we are actually over time, so we're going to have to make one of two decisions when you're finished.
Yeah.
And that is either we only do part of or we postpone item 9 to the next meeting. I wanted it, City Manager Hales and I wanted it to come out as soon as possible, but that's going to have to be a tragic choice that we make shortly. So I'm going to let you finish, and I have 5 aldermen more who want to weigh in on this
I just
item.
have one more question, or one more comment, and I'll just say, I'm as budget conscious as anybody, but with all the conversations that I had and everybody who's reached out to me since last week, since we put out that this was going to be a topic, and it's been a lot of conversations, not a single person has mentioned saving money yet at the BCPA as something that was important to them. Almost every conversation I've had so far has been about the programming and the content and what will it look like going in the future. So, I mean, I would like to save money as well as anybody else, but that's not what anybody reached out to me so far has said. They want to know about the content. They want to know about the programming. That's where everybody's concern is right now. So,
And
thank
for us,
you.
it'd be about adding. It wouldn't be about taking anything away at all.
Right. Okay. Well, at this point, we have 5 aldermen who still want to speak. Do we proceed with this and see how much time we have left? Pardon me? No?
Mayor, could I also just interject one thing too? We could take up item 9 after the regular meeting. Mr. Peters is here tonight out of
Right, well, that's
Ames,
my
Iowa,
concern.
so, we could still accomplish both if you wanted to move item 9
So do
till
we,
after the regular
we need
meeting.
where's Mr. Jurgens? We need a suspension of the rules? Okay, does the chair have the discretion to do this, or because this is essentially a separate meeting, so I'm assuming we need a vote. In other words, we would postpone item 9 until after the city council meeting tonight.
Well, you can't necessarily postpone it to the regular meeting.
To after the regular meeting.
You'd have to
That's a separate meeting?
recess this meeting, continue it for a time certain, and then,
We'd have to recess this meeting, go to the regular meeting,
right,
and then come back.
that's right.
Okay.
Now, the other option is you have 30 minutes scheduled for the other discussion. You could also
See if it takes that long.
wrap up this discussion if you
Well, I
go
have
a
5
little
more
bit-
aldermen who want to speak on
If
this.
you go a little bit longer, the regular meeting could just start a little bit later.
7:30.
Okay, all right, well, let's continue to see how quickly these other questions go, because we, as again, had 5 more aldermen who want to speak. Alderwoman Painter.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. I want to piggyback on what Alderman Massey had said. I know that the Illinois Symphony Orchestra has long-standing dates at the BCPA, and so do the barber shoppers. Would you raise the rent on them?
No, I mean, but that'd be your decision, because,
Okay,
I mean,
that
we
would-
can show you the implications of doing that, but it wouldn't, we wouldn't be authorized to do that, nor would we recommend it.
All right, so you would come to the council anytime, you had
Have to
a
approve the
concern
rates.
about that, or the ticket prices? Okay.
Well, they will set the ticket prices, so, I mean, they'll set their own
Okay.
ticket prices, but.
All right. And would you ever bump any long-standing shows if you got another show to come in? Would you say, oh, sorry, Illinois Symphony Orchestra?
No, the difference between what I'm talking about in terms of added programming and what these seasons represent is that these are booked months and months in advance. The kinds of shows we're talking about book on a much shorter cycle, so 3, 4, 5 months. Like I talked about holds that we have now for a pipeline that goes through, say, April. So these are announced and on the book before we'd be booking most of that stuff. Now, it's possible you would have one of those before this gets booked, and you'd book around it, but no, that never happens.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Alderman Black.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. And David, I want to put a special thanks out to you. Every year we task you with finding ways to come up with some savings for the city and get creative with them, and this is an example of that direction, and you've really done a lot of legwork in making this happen. And I really appreciate the detail and the nuance in this proposal, because it's a lot easier for us to look at this and make an informed decision about what we're doing or not doing than just kind of a pie in the sky. We should sell the BCPA, or we should get rid of the golf courses, or something like that. So I just appreciate the level of detail that's here. And I'll be very brief, and I know that we have a lot of people that want to speak. I'm not inclined to move forward with this proposal, and I'm going to tell you why. And I want to just turn everybody's attention to page 56 of the proposal, the marketing overview. The Venue Works has been involved with the arena now for a little bit of time, and as somebody who pays attention to what's going on in the city, I often miss things that are going on at the arena. I hear about shows after they've happened when I would likely be a very paying customer, and I worry that the marketing and the filling of seats and the shows that are there may translate to the BCPA, and I love the BCPA. I've been to many shows there, and it's the feedback that I've gotten from the public is, why are we doing this? And we can talk about the finances and that. But the question in front of me tonight is, do you want to proceed with this further? And my answer at this point in time is no, because looking at some of once we are armed with a complete view of the market, VenueWorks Marketing Department will work with local stakeholders to develop strategic marketing plans that will serve as visual blueprints for positioning and marketing the Bloomington Center for the Performing Arts. Yes, but we've been in the community for, year, 18 months. there should be a complete view of the market. And as somebody who I'm a little disappointed in the performance thus far, and I tend to tie people's what they've done to what they will do, and I'm concerned. So I'm going to just go ahead and say at this point in time, I'm not interested in proceeding, but that's not for lack of detail or looking at the numbers, because we appreciate your diligence, and I look forward to future conversation if this council decides to go down that route.
Okay. Alderwoman Howman, Burgess, and Millawamboy.
Thanks, Mr. Peters. A couple questions.
Would you
You
agree
talk
with
about new revenue streams. Friends of the BCPA is already doing fundraising, so I'm concerned.
No, I'm not terribly, we're not, I don't know that fundraising for us is really sponsorship development more than it is the kind of fundraising that was talked about by Alderman Matthew.
Yeah, and we do already have some event sponsorships in place, and premium seating, and my concern is similar to Alderman Black's about marketing of the BCPA. I haven't seen a lot. We're probably one of the only 5 people in the city that take the pantograph. Sorry, Maria. A paper copy of the pantograph, and I don't see a lot of advertising about events. What's considered a major event? Is that a Hank Williams or?
Well, we would have hoped that it was. I mean, and I'm not satisfied with
No,
with
but
where we're at either
but-
over at the arena.
But I'm looking at the events coming up, and I don't see any other. If Hank Williams is considered a major event, I don't see any.
Concerts.
I see holds.
Primarily, yeah, well, because they're
nothing,
not
even
ready
the
to
whole-
announce what the names are, though there's a name behind each one of those.
But even the holds don't start until February, and that's 4 months away.
I think
so-
we have some prior to that, but we have in the next, like I said, the next 6 months or so. We
Yeah,
get past probably the new year, so. Because they're going to need 6 or 8 weeks of promotion time. So, yeah, you're not going to see them until after the first of the year. With one possible exception. I think we have one possible exception coming up yet that might add for this year. But I'm not happy with where we're at in the arena either, to Alderman Black's comment, because, like I said earlier, I mean, I've dumped a lot of money into this market trying to find where that sweet spot is, and I think we're getting to it, but we're not there.
And-
But I think we're getting close. I'm sorry.
And this is more a comment to the council, and that is that earlier this year, I think we agreed to move forward with the Creativity Center, and, I mean, in essence, by saying, let's provide the funds to make the necessary repairs to the building. And I guess I assumed, and I know the definition of assume, that we would support the Creativity Center based on the money we were putting into it. I mean, there was really no point in redoing the roof and the HVAC and other things if we're going to dump the project. So, just
Okay.
my 2 cents for whatever it's worth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Burgess, Millawamboy, and Sage.
Just to follow up briefly on Alderman Howman, I think major event depends. I mean, my household, Paw Patrol, big deal.
Yeah, it
Very
is.
big deal.
Yeah.
When we drove by the arena and saw the sign for that, it got very loud in my car. Yeah. But I think
That
it
one is,
depends
believe me.
on how, what the appeal is. But in general, I think there is value in continuing this conversation. I think that we need to be very deliberate. I think what you're hearing here is how much the community really values this facility, and that we understand that the value does not always show up on a spreadsheet. So we want to make sure that those other aspects that bring a lot of value to our community are preserved, depending on how we go forward. But I think we should continue this conversation and fully explore this option and the opportunities it may provide, and make sure we have any of our concerns about changes, addressed, or to know what we're getting into. My question is, we have the Cultural District Commission. Its job is to help advise the council. We have a number of members from that commission here this evening. I'm curious if other members on council would be interested in sending this to the Cultural District Commission to have them evaluate and give us their feedback as that body that looks at this area and has been very involved in the BCP over the years. And because I know they have a lot of concerns and questions that are very well informed and could help guide us in this decision-making process.
I see a lot of nodding heads.
Mayor, could I just interject as a tie-in to that? We did have a meeting scheduled for last Thursday, but there was a staff mix-up, and the proper meeting notice wasn't advertised, so we're going to be there this Thursday morning, but did want to share with you, it was good intentions to get with them ahead of time until the ball was dropped on the public meeting notice. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Alderman Wambwe,
Thank you.
Sage, and Schmidt.
Okay, I'll be brief because I think a lot of the questions have been asked already. But I think similar to Alderman Matthey, I'm really curious what other communities have to say about this specific arrangement. I know you did a reference check, a while back when it was only about the arena, but I think it would be nice to get a refresh and investigate that a little bit further to see what exactly their experience is.
Could I respond to one thing? Because I'm sure that maybe you're referencing Burlington, Iowa. And we're good, but we're not perfect. So we've been in Burlington, Iowa for 3 years, managing the Burlington Memorial Auditorium, a very old theater, auditorium, flat floor, balcony, wraps around it, stage at one end, and some service area down below. It's right on the banks of the Mississippi, and sometimes it's in the Mississippi. And there are flood barriers around the building a number of months of the year, almost every year. Our box office has been underwater. It's across the parking lot and a former visitor center more than once. And the city has come to the opinion that they don't want to continue to spend the kind of money to keep in a venue that can host touring entertainment. And with our recommendation, we said, look, they have limited funds. We were able to pay for ourselves in terms of new revenue, but we were never able to bring the total investment down because it was a difficult sell, quite frankly. So we recommended, and I think the direction that they're going to take is we're filling out our obligations through the end of this year. And at the end of this year, it's going to become what I would call a community-based center, where they won't offer all the services that we would necessarily offer. People will use it more of what I call a four-wall kind of experience, where they bring in their own services, and it'll cost less to do. They do have one season, a series, a community concert series that brings, I think, 8 events a year through there, and hopefully they'll be able to continue that. But it just didn't seem to be a place where they should continue to spend money on us, and they had a lot of other places for that. So that was
Thank you.
That was a mutual agreement. It wasn't us just walking away from it.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that up. I appreciate that.
But I would invite you, please, talk to any of the other cities that we have theaters in.
And I think the other thing that I'm also concerned about, again, I'm interested in continuing the conversation, but I'm not quite sure. You talked about the sweet spot, in each area that you go to, and I think there's a lot of competition for entertainment dollars in the area, and I'm not quite sure. I'm reminded of a former director of athletics at ISU who said that his biggest competition, was not other sports programs necessarily or other football programs.
It's that.
Yes, but it
It's
was also
screens.
kids sports, because parents go
Yeah.
all day, to their kids sports, and in the evening they just don't have time or don't feel like going to any of the other events. So I'm really curious how you're going to make that work while preserving the character of the BCPA that's been so dear to a lot of people, because we definitely want to preserve that.
All right. Alderman Sage and Schmidt.
Thank you. I'll be brief. David, I'm in favor of continuing the conversation. There are a number of questions that I think have been raised, and I think that additional due diligence will help us make a better informed decision. I will say, I am reminded again that our city manager, our city staff has reminded us we are quickly approaching a $1 million plus, perhaps higher structural deficit as we look at next year's budget. These conversations and these decisions will not get any easier. And each time we begin to talk about something and look at an alternative delivery of service or a reduction in service, the gallery will be filled with familiar faces. And so, again, I would just encourage all of us to recognize that we cannot continue to avoid those tough conversations. We talked about it. Alderman Black spoke very eloquently about it a few weeks ago, the need that we're going to have going into the budget process. I will tell you I'm less than optimistic after what I've seen here over the last couple of years that we will have the leadership courage to make those tough decisions, because I promise you the gallery will get more full, the faces will become more familiar, and at the end of the day, then we have a multi-million-dollar structural deficit, and either changes in service delivery are going to have to be made or taxes are going to have to be raised. It's not more complicated than that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderwoman Schmidt.
I will also be brief. There are many things in this proposal that I like, and there are some things in here that I have some deep questions about. I really like Alderman Burgess's suggestion that we get some feedback from the cultural district. I don't think any of them have seen this. And in terms of helping us keep true to the mission and the vision of the BCPA, I would really value their perspective if we can keep that within a time frame that's reasonable. I'd like to see that go forward, and also to hear more about the Creativity Center, because that's very important.
Okay. So if I can summarize our conversation, if others can correct me, we are interested in continuing this conversation, and with specific reference to the Cultural District Commission itself, that it will be meeting this Thursday and getting some of their feedback, and continuing obviously our due diligence and obviously the cost factor moving forward, with particular emphasis on the role in the Creativity Center. Is that a fair statement? Okay, so I think that's the guidance that we have. We appreciate your
Well, it's good to be
help.
here.
And we're hoping that as soon as possible, you can, if we can help you find that sweet spot, let us know how we can
I
help.
don't have all the money in the world. I do want to tell you, and I don't take any credit for this, but I live in the town of Ames, Iowa, and it's Iowa State University. It's a university town. But there is no credit to me, but there's a wonderful venue there called the Octagon that is very much like what I think your Creativity Center could become. And those that want to plan that might want to take a trip over to Ames. I'm sure the folks there would share information. But it was there when I came to Ames in '82, so it goes back a long ways. It's accomplishing many of the same things you'd like your Creativity Center to accomplish.
Thanks. And we actually have some direct and indirect contacts in Ames. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, at this point, I would assume we can begin our conversation of 9. We may need to continue it, depending on how long we go. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Alderman Sage, who circulated a petition, and I just wanted to say that we typically, when we have something put on the agenda, it's either the mayor and the city manager or a city council petition. Sometimes the city council petitions take weeks, sometimes months to get on. This we received October 4th, and it's on, so it's with record speed for a lot of reasons. I think this is an important conversation to have, and have it quickly, and I'm going to turn it over to Alderman Sage.
Thank you. And fellow alderman, in a minute I'll ask Mr. Juergens to come forward and talk a little bit. I think over the recent past, as I begin to better understand the process for reimbursable expenses, it seemed to me that probably our policies needed to be revisited, and perhaps specifically for us as elected officials, that we might be willing to hold ourselves to a higher standard related to that. So what I did was just to begin to have some very general conversations with individual aldermen, and there seemed to be a consensus from those that I spoke with that this was a topic worth visiting more about. So what I did was then approach Mr. Juergens and say, here are some values, I think, some principles, some things that I think we need to look at and perhaps lay out more detail around, and so that we all have a clear understanding of what would constitute reimbursable expenses for elected officials, and then a process for how we might administer that. So Jeff, if you don't mind, if you could come and perhaps just share a little background, and perhaps then some hopefully some improvements and progress made around the existing policies.
Certainly, Alderman Sage. Good evening, everybody. Alderman Sage contacted me today and asked that I go through kind of some major points on this. The first one, as he talked to me about this policy, he was wanting a single authoritative document for elected officials. I thought that was an important point that I think he had maybe discussed with some of the aldermen. So right now, we currently have a number of different policies. We have a P-card policy that governs the purchases on city credit cards. We have a policy on travel reimbursement and travel. We have finance requirements on employee reimbursements. So we have several existing various policies and procedures, but not one that specifically addresses elected officials for reimbursements or for their expenses. So that, I think, as Alderman Sage has told me, was one of the initial factors to try and get something put together here. The second point that he talked about was transparency, wanting something that improves transparency for the taxpayers, gives clear line of sight as to how the policies are to be implemented and handled, and reimbursements to be made. As you can see from the policy, a part of this major overhaul is to change from a direct purchase policy or practice to a reimbursement model for the city. And some of you have discussed with me how this is perhaps more in line with common business practices and something you wanted to see put in place for the elected officials. The third major issue that Alderman Sage wanted addressed in the policy was clarity on the types of meals that would be subject to reimbursement and tighter restrictions as outlined in the policy. And you can read some of that in there, and I'd be happy to go over some more of that as well. Fourth issue was the prohibition on elected officials from having a P card in their name. Again, this is to kind of change from a reimbursement model, or change to a reimbursement model on expenses. It does not prohibit administration from putting certain charges on a city P card. So, for example, if a airline ticket does need to be purchased, a registration to a conference, or a hotel for a conference, city administration could still put that on a city administration P card, because I don't know that you'd expect an elected official with the nominal salaries that are received for you to have to put a $2,000, $3,000, or $4,000 charge on your personal credit card. So that would still be something that city admin could do. And the final thing to be addressed was the food for meetings. It's not uncommon for if the city council is starting a meeting at 5 right after a lot of you get off from work and come here and immediately start a meeting, to have some food available to eat as you get ready, and what could be a 4+ hour meeting. But a lot of the desire that I heard from individual council members was that maybe this was a practice that should be eliminated. And so whether that in turn means that we try to start meetings later, or we do some sort of other issue with the food, but get away from the practice of the city providing and paying for that food. So those are the 5 major things. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the policy. It is obviously just a working draft, so we can tailor it as the council desires and go from there on it.
Questions of Mr. Jurgens? Alderwoman Hellman.
A couple, and this is probably more semantics than anything else. Under applicability, it says city's elected officials, namely the mayor and aldermen. Who else would there be? Who else is elected?
Just the mayor and aldermen, yes.
Yes,
So we
so,
can.
I mean, that seems like it doesn't need to be there. Sorry.
And as you're looking for that second one, the other thing I would say is, in talking with the city manager, I think the staff would also be looking at maybe tailoring some of its policies too, and tightening up some of its policies as following suit on some of this. But anyway, go ahead. Alderman Hellman.
Mileage and parking and other transportation costs, if it's ground transportation, it seems like if multiple people are traveling to the same place, we should be coordinating those rather than having 4 people driving to Chicago for IML, paying separate mileage and parking, et cetera. So looking at economizing.
And you could at least, at the very least, maybe want to encourage that. I mean, to the extent all of your schedules will match up, where that's possible to consolidate travel.
Yeah. And then for community luncheons and dinners, I'd like to see that something in there about repayment if we don't attend. So if I tell Joni that I'm going to go to the chamber breakfast and then I don't show up, that I be held accountable for repaying for that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. Alderman Milwamboy and Sage.
Quick question. I do remember when we were in DC a while back, we had to call in, several of us, right, for a meeting.
Remote attendance. Yes.
Right, remote attendance. There was a cost associated with that. And I'm not sure, if it fits in here. I mean, I know I don't want to get too detailed.
I believe
but-
our remote attendance policy addresses that separately.
Okay, all right.
I can't recall off the top of my head whether it provides that's at your sole cost and expense or whether the city pays for that, but I believe it does address it.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Okay. Alderman Sage.
Thank you. And let me comment first before then I move to the ask, and that is, David, and I've said this before publicly, one of the practices that I've appreciated that you have implemented is this idea that we talk about a topic, an agenda item, a proposal, if you will, at one meeting, and then in fairly quick order move towards putting it on the agenda for the next meeting or very soon. And again, I like the approach that's been taken with this tonight. My hope, my intent would be to, finish our conversation here tonight. I think provide some additional feedback as needed. I think Alderwoman Howman makes a couple of good points, and then look at putting this on the agenda for 2 weeks on the 23rd for a vote.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that either. Yeah. Alderwoman Schmidt.
Just want to say I like the ordinance. I think it makes sense. It certainly aligns with any business practices I've ever had in my current position or at Illinois Wesleyan or anywhere else, and it all makes sense to me. I appreciate having everything wrapped up together.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, I'm sorry, Kim. Yes, Kim.
I just wanted to thank Jeff for his work on this. I think as those folks that signed on to get this together worked with you, we were just amazed at the speed with which you were able to put things together, and we thank you for that. But also in the thoroughness and the idea that this is a going forward practice, a guidepost and a guideline for all of us to have some predictability about how we can manage our expenses and just in a going forward way have that consensus and guidance. So I appreciate your work on it and my other aldermen who worked on it as well.
Okay. Mr. Hales, did you have a final comment? Oh, okay.
Nope.
All right. I think we've got guidance on this, and we will. I need a motion to adjourn, and we will see you in about 9 minutes. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Alderwoman Howman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Black. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. See you in 8 minutes.